Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's lunchtime in Minnesota. Good morning. Sorry about that. Good morning. Here we are, Thursday afternoon. It is time to get started, and we are back. It's noontime in Minnesota. It is wherever you are, whether it's morning, afternoon, or tomorrow if you're in Australia, or in New Zealand, wherever you are. So, let us get moving. We already just talked in our previous stream about the Platts and their life in the Quiverful movement. And now we're going to just switch on to another Fundy family, the Duggars. Now, there are a lot of people in this world that are obsessed with cults and obsessed with the Fundy movement, and I am one of them. Now, if you didn't know, before I actually started my YouTube, I was a writer for Patheos, where I wrote a column on the Atheist Network, and I was surrounded by amazing writers who covered a lot of the hypocrisy that exists in fundamental Christianity. And some of the favorite articles that I read, and one of the favorite blogs I read was called No Longer Quivering. Written by my good friend Suzanne, who is a talented writer who has spent more than 16 years in the churches that are quiverful and was well versed in the life of the Duggars, as well as a key player in disseminating information about Josh and Anna in 2015 when everything went viral related to his previous allegations of misconduct against his sisters, along with the Ashley Madison accounts. Now, No Longer Quivering is still one of my favorites, and I it was with her blessing, along with her, I was motivated by seeing what she had done, and I wanted to, be another sort of advocate against this sort of work, these sort of groups. So she has given me a ton of backstory about this family, which has enabled me to deliver you good content, and I hope you'll enjoy today's episode. So we're going to talk about Derick Dillard. Now, Derick and Jill Dillard have been married for a number of years, and they were one of the first, I think the first girl married of this family. Josh and Anna were the first married couple, Josh being the oldest son. And then Jill Dillard is the second oldest daughter. Jill and Derick have a courtship and a marriage that's very different than what you see from the more traditional side of the family. Now, a lot of people hate Derick for his very conservative beliefs in relation to the LGBTQ, along with, his thoughts about a lot of different topics, because he's a conservative Christian. However, Jill and Derick seem to ascribe to a very different form of Christianity than the Duggars. For instance, Jill and Derick have been outspoken about their use of birth control. Derick attended secular high school. He also attended secular college, and he is in his second year of law school. He is immersed and enmeshed into the secular world. His mother, he was raised by a mother who was single. I believe she was a widow. His mother had only 2 children. She worked full time. She had a master's degree, and she wore pants. So Derick's sort of life was a little bit different. Still conservative, but not as conservative as the Duggar family. When he and Jill married, their courtship was first and foremost one of the top, draws to the show. And as counting on, sort of when the proverbial crap hit the fan in 2015 with Josh's scandal related to Ashley Madison, and then the Duggars cover up of his stuff, and then their lack of remorse for supporting Josh and really minimizing what Josh did to their daughters, made there be a massive blowback by fans. And so they decided to stop filming 19 Kids and Counting, and they were supposed to be moving towards and getting away from 19 Kids and Counting, and they were going to focus instead on Counting On, which was supposed to be about the older children and their courting and their new relationships. But over the years, fans have noticed that year by year, Michelle and Jim Bob have been taking up more and more space on the show, and it's evident that this isn't really anything different except for the adult children being the primary focus. The Duggar family is still an elemental part of it. They're in nearly every episode. They're interviewed. And so this whole idea that the Duggars were going to be fired never really happened. Derick Dillard has long said that he was never fired from TLC. And what happened was in 2017, shortly after the birth of his second son, he was very critical of TLC because TLC, he said that Jill, if you remember, she had emergency surgery following it because she had a hemorrhage. Now, this is the second time Jill had hemorrhaging after her birth. And due to her emergency surgery and the critical need of what she was going through following that birth, Derick was openly critical of TLC, stating that TLC did not pay them at all for her birth special. They did not receive one dime from the birth special. They did not receive any benefits or help with medical expenses from TLC. And it was this sort of accusation that kind of blew up and created a massive rift between Derick and Jim Bob and TLC. Now, TLC discontinued filming them after he made statements on Twitter related to another show, Jazz, who was a transgender young woman. And he said that, her life he was very critical, not very nice. And they said that they would no longer be filming with him due to those statements. But the rumor mill is that his release or non-filming had absolutely actually nothing to do with those statements, but rather that he was painting the Duggar family in a poor light. His statements were not reflective of the peachy keen strawberry apple pie sort of image that the Duggars have crafted over the past 20 years. And he also shared a live stream that notoriously showed Michelle, who is Miss Hi, everyone be joyful available, caught on camera screaming at her daughters, almost pinning her into a corner and yelling. And then as soon as she sees Derick filming, and he was live on Instagram when all of this went down, and as soon as she sees the camera, she's like, hi guys, I love you. So she went from berating and almost verbally abusing her daughter, scaring her daughter to the point where her daughter was like leaning away from her. And this is the same family that is all about not sparing the rod. They don't spare the rod. They're all about using that rod. So a lot with this family. There is physical abuse. There's no way of going around it. They follow Debbie and the Pearls, training up the child. They are Bill Gothard devotees who has terrible parenting advice on his website, Institutes for Basic Life Principles. So Debbie and what's his name? Pearl. Debbie and something Pearl. Oh my God, they're terrible human beings. Anyways, so despite the fact that they are involved in all of this crap, the Duggars pretend like on the surface that they're this wholesome family that has no underlying issues. There's no problems with anything. And Derick has been pretty critical from the get-go since 2017 about those cracks within the foundation. And it was noted and it's rumored that his firing had less to do with what he said about Jazz and more to do with the fact that he was exposing the underside of the Duggars that they didn't want you to see, because his beliefs about jazz are not different than anyone else in his family. Every single person in his family, I guarantee you, on the Bible, if you believe in God, on oath under like risk of perjury, I tell you, they all feel that same way because it's part of their fundamental beliefs. Michael Pearl, thank you. Debbie and Michael Pearl. So now, 2 years later, with Counting On now entering its whatever billionth season, he's on Twitter, still raging war against not only TLC, but now with Jim Bob, but now against TLC. Now he has been steadfast that he and Jill were never paid for one lick of work, and he has said numerous times that Jim Bob told the kids that they were supposed to film as a mission and for the Lord's work, and that Jim Bob is the one that gets all of the money and his kids never see a dime. Now, the stuff with the benefits and paying for the actual like hospital stays, they're contractors, so none of these networks would actually provide benefits for anything. So his wanting them to pay for the hospital stuff wouldn't happen because they are not considered employees. So on Twitter, Derick has been busy. So when asked about it, he wrote on October of 2017, and this is when it all started, is, I thought it was fair to ask in negotiation. TLC made lots of money in filming the birth special episode, and they had not offered to pay us anything. So I thought the very least we could reimburse $5 to $10K for medical expenses. Sure, TLC made money more than that off of us. Why don't you guys believe in health insurance? We have it, but there are deductibles. And so this person said in 2018, true, so why does Jim Bob get all of the money for the show and doesn't give any of it to his children, the actors of the show? And he says, I don't know, you would have to ask him that. So that was his response a year later. And then again, in October 21st, they said to him, he negotiated for you also as just Jill. And he said, for everyone without telling anyone. Yikes. And so it said, someone responded, Jim Bob should not be negotiating for the adult children, and TLC knows that. And he responded, yeah, but all TLC is worried about is making that money. So if they can blame corruption on somebody else but still get away with the benefits, then they'll happily do so. And they said, does this include money from Counting On or just 19 Kids and Counting? Regardless, what a selfish man. And he said, both. And they said, Derick, this is very troubling. 19 Kids and Counting and Counting On has made at least $1 billion since its production in the last 10 years. Guarantee they've made more. Why don't you kids, adults, when on the show, have their own contracts? Do you know how much money these shows make? And he says, TLC has issues. They begged us not to quit filming, but then didn't want to talk directly with us about why. If money is all they care about, then it's going to catch up with them. You must care about people. All I've got to say is they better lawyer up because a storm is inevitable. And then someone replied to that. So that's basically him threatening that there's going to be a lawsuit coming down. And he said, this is naive and not even a little bit true. TLC doesn't owe you anything in our society. Discovery Inc. is lawyered to the brim. You have nothing on them. They could bury you in legal fees into oblivion. And if you want to sue someone, sue your father-in-law. And he says, I don't think you understand how our legal system works. You don't get a pass on justice just because you have resources. That might work if it's a close call, but not otherwise. You just might not hear about it because they settle out of court. And they responded that there's a difference between the law, ethics, and morality. Feel free to believe that you should do whatever you think is right, but unless they agree to it beforehand, they don't legally owe you anything. This is capitalism. You talk as though you know what happens behind closed doors. You don't know our story. And there they are, the warring couple. So essentially what he's saying is he's accusing Jim Bob of negotiating contracts behind closed doors, not telling the children about it, and then not paying them. And that TLC literally doesn't care, because as long as the money goes out and the contract is paying Jim Bob with the expectation that he would pay the kids, or that it's like all the contracts are in Jim's name, which is not uncommon. I believe a similar contract was was in place for Mama June Shannon when she was on TLC's Honey Boo Boo. I don't believe anyone else but her was paid, and she was to pay everyone else on the show. Which begs the question is, why is TLC allowing people onto their network and not putting individual contracts in place for each individual person and cast member of the show? Each person that's filmed has theoretically worked and has required payment by law. And are the Duggars so naive as adults that they don't realize that they're entitled to payment and entitled to receive money for their work? And the fact that Derick has been consistently saying this, and I will note, his story has not changed. And I don't doubt that this is similar to how things are done, because in the current federal indictment of Todd Chrisley as it relates to USA Network, and Chrisley knows best, USA Network was paying a production company that was set up by Todd, and then that production company was to pay the cast members. So basically, USA Network, according to alleged by the federal government, paid the production company, and then Todd was to pay the cast. I don't know if that's all true, but it doesn't seem to be an abnormal way. It's maybe a way for them not to have so many hands in the cookie jar. But theoretically, if they are filming and working, they should be getting paid. So is Jim Bob withholding money from them and using all the money for himself? Derick is adamant that they've never been paid. You can tell that these kids don't have, maybe they have some money. Maybe he's giving them some level of money, but I don't know how much money they're actually being paid. But they do, I agree with Derick in this, that even if you don't agree with what they stand for and what TLC and what the Duggars believe, they still have a right to be paid. And just because TLC is a large network and has resources doesn't mean that people can't sue them for not following the law for paying people for work. There are labor laws in place in the government. And it seems as though they might be using a loophole around that. And Jim Bob, being the greedy POS that he is, could likely just be pocketing all of this and making it all about him. And then saying, well, I let you live in my houses, and I let you do this, and I let you do that. Because Jim Bob is still very much on this show. This past week, on their episode, they went camping, which, by the way, was the most sexist camping I've ever seen. The boys got to go on a scavenger hunt, and the girls got to stay back at the campsite and put up the tents, put together the campsite, and cook, while the boys all got to have fun and explore the park and the grounds. So men in their family are the ones that get to have fun, and the women are always stuck no matter what they're doing, whether they're at home or they're camping. The women are the ones that are working constantly. And mind you, the women are putting up the tents in skirts because they all wear skirts. They don't wear pants. They have to wear their skirts. And I've noticed that even the girls that wear pants when they're not with the family do not wear pants when they're with the family. So Jessa, who has worn pants, wasn't wearing pants that day. And Abby, who has worn pants, wasn't wearing pants that day. So they're all wearing pants even though they're not. They're all wearing skirts, probably to appease them. And even Ginger, when on the show, typically wears skirts for purposes of the show. Now, we all know Ginger doesn't follow her own, she beats to her own drum, but I'm steadfast in this, that Jill is by far the more rebellious of the two. Jill has done so many more things than Ginger has even accomplished in terms of her defiance to her parents. Jill and her family now celebrate Halloween. She and her kids, she wears pants. Derick has publicly said they use birth control. He says that he would support Jill having a job outside of the work. Jill uses her Instagram to make money. She has advocated against domestic violence and even has suggested that people that are in violent marriages get divorced. So she's also this past summer went to a celebration to celebrate women's suffrage at the governor's mansion in Arkansas. So she, even though Derick has those very fundamental, conservative beliefs as they relate to the LGBTQ, Jill, to me, seems like far more rebellious and far more separated from this family. And a lot of people in this, the rumors that swirl the family is that Jill and, because they're not on the show and they can't be on the show, they're essentially shunned from the family. And you don't see Jill in photos for often, ever, with her parents. She ran into her mother while she was at a consignment place and took a photo with her mom, but you really don't see photos of her with her mom and dad frequently. So as they get older and more of these kids start to move out and away, I think you're going to start to see more subtle rebellion from them. Ginger is following her own tune, but I don't think that we should... I really think we need to temper our expectations about what Ginger is doing because her husband is still extremely conservative and he's the one that allows her to do whatever she wants. With Derick, it does appear that Derick has a lot more freedom for her, even though they pretend to be very like perfect Christian on the surface. I think there's a lot underneath that. There's a lot more liberalism there than we realize. So this is where we're at with the Dillards. I would love to know, a fly in a wall, what happens next with this. Jed Dillard, Jed Duggar, if you haven't realized, just filed to run for Congress in the state of Arkansas for a House seat. And it appears that, some of these members are very unwilling to separate themselves from it, but others aren't. Even though Derick chaps my hide with some of his beliefs, I do commend him for standing up and speaking out against this, because nothing will change if people from casts remain quiet and silent. And Jim Bob, by no means, nor should TLC, be allowed to not pay these cast members who literally had their lives on display for most of their lives and have nothing to show for it. That's just simply not fair. All right, you guys, I'll be back with more. Caitlin Baltiera broke her silence about her sister-in-law's arrest, and I don't think you'll be shocked by what she said. Bye, guys.